Thanks for tuning in to PodCatalyst, the official podcast of IABC. Today, we're bringing back our In Under 10 series, where we talk about trends and issues impacting the world of communications in 10 minutes or less. In this episode, you'll hear from my colleague, Dawn Delatour, who spent some time on the ground at IABC World Conference earlier this summer in Vancouver. She took a moment to catch up with a few expert speakers on the topics, issues, and trends that really matter most to them. Today, you'll hear from Christal Austin, who works for the Public Affairs Department at the Government of Barbados. During conference, she led a hands-on workshop around crisis communications using real-world examples from her work and others. She and Dawn discuss crisis communication strategies and their complexities, sharing when defensive strategies like denial may protect or damage trust. And during a time when misinformation, disinformation, and citizen journalists are on the rise, Christal offers us a practical look into what communicators can do in their work. Special thanks to Christal for joining us, for coming to Vancouver from Barbados and sharing her expertise. And with that, let's get started with the show.
Hi, Christal. Thanks so much for joining me today. I'm really looking forward to diving into the full range of crisis communication strategies and how communicators can navigate them with both confidence and care. As you know, crisis communication involves a spectrum of strategies, everything from denial and justification to acceptance and apology. So how can communicators decide when a defensive tactic might be helpful versus when it could harm trust?
Thank you so much, Dawn, for this invitation to participate in the PodCatalyst show. I've come all the way from Barbados, so I'm truly thrilled to be involved in all aspects of the World Conference, including this. The concept of crisis communication strategy is a stratum that ranges from accommodative to defensive options. As communicators, our instinct is always to reach for empathy, and certainly there are many instances where that is important, but equally in this era where there is misinformation and disinformation, where citizen journalists may want to reshare information without verifying it just for the clout, where persons may use AI to generate information about your organization that can be hallucinated and not necessarily factual. It is important for us to defend our organization's reputation in those instances so that we are able to maintain credibility and put paid to these false notions. But the moment that there's a sliver of doubt as to an organization's innocence in any perceived crisis, then it is important that we dial back the defensiveness and raise the volume on empathy. My favorite definition of a crisis is taken from Jim Lukashevsky, who is an IABC fellow and a global PR and crisis communications veteran. And Lukashevsky defines a crisis as a show-stopping, people-stopping, product-stopping situation that creates victims and explosive visibility. Once there are victims involved, even if an organization is innocent of any involvement, there is an imperative to be empathetic to their loss, to their suffering. So trust demands that we take a stand, yes, to defend ourselves, but once there are victims involved, then we must demonstrate empathy.
So that makes a lot of sense. I think it really shows how timing, context, and tone can make all the difference in whether a strategy builds credibility or backfires. So let's talk about a tactic that doesn't always get the spotlight. Ingratiation, or the effort to quickly gain favor or goodwill, is sometimes dismissed or misunderstood. Can you break down what this looks like in practice and how it can actually strengthen stakeholder relationships during difficult moments?
That's a wonderful question, and indeed, ingratiation is often overlooked. This is because if it isn't done well, it can feel like manipulation. But if it is done correctly, it is not necessarily flattery, but it should be seen as emotional intelligence in action. In practice, it could look like this. let's say a financial institution CFO is forced to step down because of evidence that he has sexually harassed several females in the organization. And in an act of ingratiation, the CEO makes a donation to a women's rights organization and makes a statement to distance the organization naturally from the actions of the CFO, to reinforce the values of the financial institution, and certainly to resonate or to stand with the white hats in the community on this issue. That in and of itself is a really wonderful way to begin to broker some emotional equity to move the situation forward positively for everyone involved. The challenge with that, especially when it's a self-inflicted crisis, is that organizations have to also demonstrate alongside ingratiation that they have done the introspection and made the changes, the corrective action to heal the situation, to close the door on any repetition of that infelicity. If an organization twins that with ingratiation, then I would say it's a sound strategy, especially if the person carrying the message, the messenger, is believable, authentic, and transparent. But it has, again, to go along with this notion that the company has to do its own work in-house to fix what allowed the problem to exist in the first place.
That's a great example. I think when used thoughtfully, it can help rebuild connection and show that the organization is listening and responsive. So we've talked about strategy. Now let's talk about some execution. What's one essential tool, habit, or mindset that communicators can rely on to respond more effectively under pressure?
For the crisis communicator, preparation is our superpower. Crises will always test or resolve, but preparation ensures that we can meet the moment. Now, that preparation has to be more tangible than a playbook, for example. And a practical example could be the escalation process through which the message goes out. We all know that the very first hour of a crisis and how a company responds determines who really controls the narrative. It's imperative that in the preparation process leading up to a crisis, it's almost like a relay where the baton of the message is passed from, let's say, the senior communications practitioner to the director of comms, who then passes it to the chief admin officer, and then it gets handed over at the finish line to the media. That baton rehearsal, just like the athletes do in preparing for the Olympics, needs to be a smooth and practiced effort long before a crisis occurs. So it's that kind of practical preparation that I think allows crisis communicators to really maintain composure, because they are comfortable that they've been given the resources and the personnel to be able to execute. The challenge, though, is that many organizations today are either ambivalent to crises because everyone is so busy trying to achieve KPIs and targets, or, as is the case in a lot of instances, they're just handling multiple concurrent mini crises day after day. So there's no time to sit down and actually plan for a major crisis. And I think that's where crisis communicators must have a very strong voice and resolve in escalating their demand for the resources and the preparatory effort on behalf of the organization in conjunction with whatever matrix teams they're given to be able to put things in place. So preparation is our superpower, but we also have to negotiate our way into that preparation.
Awesome. That's a really helpful point. I think having that steadying approach really makes all the difference when the pressure is on. So thank you so much for your perspectives today. What stands out is that effective crisis communication goes beyond just the right words. It's about understanding people, anticipating how they'll react, and knowing when to adapt. So I really hope that you enjoy the rest of the conference, and thanks again for joining me.
Thank you so much. Thank you, IABC, and thank you, IABC Vancouver, for a very warm welcome. I heard it was raining a lot before we got here, so yes, emphasis on the word warm.
Awesome.
Thanks for listening to PodCatalyst, the official podcast of IABC. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. Have a suggestion for a future episode? Send us a note at catalyst@iabc.com. To discover all IABC has to offer, visit our website at iabc.com. Until next time.